All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into a declassified report from 1974. And let me tell you, it lays out one of the absolute weirdest stories in the history of science, let alone space exploration. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But back in the early 70s, at the peak of the Cold War and the space race, this wasn't just some fantasy. It was a dead serious question for some of the planet's top scientists. So in 1973, NASA actually put money on the table to find out. They funded a team at the super prestigious Stanford Research Institute. You'll hear them called SRI. And these guys kicked off a year-long program to look into a pretty wild idea. Could you actually train someone's ESP? Could you make it stronger? And here's the kicker. Could you measure it reliably in a lab? Okay, so the main tool for this whole thing was called the ESP teaching machine. And it was actually pretty simple, but really clever. Imagine you're the subject. You sit down in front of 4 different pictures. The machine secretly and randomly picks one of them as the target. Your job? Just guess which one it is. If you get it right, a light flashes. You hear this satisfying ding from a bell, and you get a point. The whole point was to see if that instant feedback, that ding, could help you learn to somehow feel what the machine was thinking. To see if you could actually train yourself to beat a totally random system. Now, before they even started the main event with over 100 volunteers, the SRI team did a little warm-up, a pilot study. And what they found? It was stunning. Absolutely stunning. 2 of their first subjects started getting results that, you just couldn't chalk it up to pure luck. No way. Get this. One subject, they just call him A2 in the report, got a score that was so high, over 1,400 tries, that the scientists figured the odds of it being just dumb luck were 1 in 500,000. Let that sink in. 1 in 500,000. Okay, so with results like that coming out of the pilot, how did the bigger experiment go? So they launched into the main event, Phase 1. They screened 145 different people, and just like you'd expect, most of them scored right around that 25% mark. Pure chance. But a couple of them really stood out. And one person, subject A3, was just off the charts. This person did even better than the folks in the pilot study. We're talking a score over thousands of trials, so good the probability of it being a fluke was less than 1 in a million. So you can imagine the SRI team, right? They're basically sitting on a scientific bombshell here. But they knew the old saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. They had to prove this wasn't some kind of fluke or error. So they moved on to Phase 2. They brought back their 12 best subjects, their psychic all-stars, for a whole new set of tests. And this time, it was going to be completely airtight. No human error, no influence, nothing. And this is where everything changes. See, in Phase 1, there was always something in the room, either a person watching or this clunky, noisy printer just clattering away printing out the results. But for Phase 2, they went full-on sterile. They automated the whole shebang. The data was now sent silently, invisibly, to a teletype machine in a totally separate room. It just quietly punched the results onto a paper tape. No human watching, no noisy printer, nothing. Just the subject, alone with the machine. And then, poof, it was gone. The entire phenomenon just completely, utterly vanished. The official report is so blunt about it. Suddenly, all 12 of their star subjects, the people who were hitting 1 in a million odds, they were just guessing, performing no better than you or I just flipping a coin. So what on earth happened here? I mean, think about it. The subjects, the same. The machine, the same. The guessing game, exactly the same. The only thing that changed was how they were being observed. It's like the very act of trying to pin it down, to prove it under these super strict, sterile conditions, was exactly what made the whole thing just fade away. Okay, so faced with this totally baffling result, the SRI researchers came up with a really radical idea. They called it an observer effect. Now, their theory was this. What if the very system they built to be perfectly objective, that silent, impersonal computer system, was the problem? What if it was actually interfering with the subject's ability?
What if the machine wasn't just a neutral window to look through, but an actual participant in the experiment, one that was somehow killing the very thing they were trying to measure?
And it wasn't just a wild guess. They had quotes from the subjects themselves to back this up. Their star player, remember subject A3? He said it perfectly. He reported that as soon as that silent teletype was connected, the whole vibe changed. The machine felt less personable, he said, more isolated. And all those little internal feelings he had learned to trust, they just went silent. So, to test this wild ghost in the machine theory, the team decided to try one last thing, phase 3. They basically decided to turn back the clock. They ditched the silent remote computer connection and went back to the old school method, a human experimenter sitting right there in the room, taking notes by hand. And here's where it gets really interesting. With a person back in the room, the magic came back, but only for their star, subject A3. And get this twist, when he told the experimenter, okay, this one is for real, his score shot right back up to that significant better than chance level. But when he called it a practice run, his score was just random. It's like that human connection, that feeling of it being real, allowed his ability to pop back up. And the weird part is, none of the other star subjects could do it, only him. So after this whole year-long roller coaster, the project ends with two totally opposite takeaways. On one hand, you have SRI. They're convinced they found real evidence for ESP. And maybe even more importantly, they believe they discovered that the way you watch is critically important, that it needs a personable touch. But then you have NASA, the ones paying the bills. They looked strictly at the numbers from that automated, super scientific phase 2, and they just saw failure. They said, nope, no evidence here. And they pulled the plug on the whole thing. And that's where the story just stops. It leaves us hanging with this massive, unanswered question. Was this all just a bust, a failed experiment that couldn't prove a wild claim when things got serious? Or was it something much, much weirder? Did they get a fleeting glimpse of something real? Something so incredibly delicate and sensitive that the very act of trying to pin it down with a cold, impersonal machine made it disappear like a ghost?